Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. We've got Jahoda here today, and let me tell you guys, she is a character of all time. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at what Jahoda can do at various levels of investment. Now, I do have to say, I absolutely love her character design. The star pupils, the comical expression, and the goggles are actually transparent. So that's kind of cool. We can also take a look at her idle animations, which hopefully she will perform. There we go. So she's got some more or something, and she's even got that like funny expression and stuff. Absolutely love her expressions, and I actually use like one of the Jahodas as like a transition in my videos. And yeah, I mean, she's got some of the best expressions in the game. I will say that. Her face's main expression is literally alphabet soup. And let's go ahead. There we go. We got her second idol where her compass thing seems to malfunction. And this is when I learned she actually has a mechanical hand. I didn't realize, like, look at that. That's not something that a normal hand can do. So I'm assuming it's a mechanical hand. And I do wonder what happened to lead to that. Perhaps we will learn a little bit more about her. So looking at her basic attacks, I mean, these basic attacks just have so much character and personality in them. And she even dons her goggles on for a second there as we do basic 1, basic 2. All these have great recovery animations as well. And unfortunately, when it comes to charged attacks for bow characters, they're not typically anything special. So you can just see here, not really any special animation there. And we can even take a look at her elemental skill. There we go. She throws this little cat casket thing and appears to be disappointed by its result. In terms of pre-farming for Jahoda, here you go. You've got the usual shenanigans, anemo, crystal, gemstone things. We've got beating up that giant firefly thing. Then we've got these little portable bearing parts. And finally, beat up some robots in Nodcry to get these. In terms of her talent books, she's got these as the talent books, the little birdies here. And we've also got those as well. Now, let's take a look at her build really quick. We've got Jahoda with a reasonable amount of crit rate, not as reasonable amount of crit damage, and she's mainly built for energy recharge and crit rate, because a lot of the time you will probably use her with the Favonius Warbow. In terms of her artifacts, she's using the 4-piece Viridescent Venerer to start off. I do switch around some artifacts for her, which we'll get into later, with attack percent, timepiece, attack percent goblet, and crit rate circlet. Energy recharge here also works quite well, which I might actually switch over to depending on the situation. She's starting off at Constellation 0. Maybe we'll activate her Constellation 6 by the end. And finally, her talents are 6, 9, and 9. So let's take a look at Jahoda's kit, starting with, of course, her basic attacks against our good old Regisfine friend. And needless to say, Jahoda's basic attacks are, well, disappointing to say the least. And this is where I say, you know, she deals negligible damage with her basic attacks. And indeed, that is very true. But you can do the arc shot every once in a while, or, you know, I can't really do it anymore after all these years, but you can do that. Jahoda does, of course, count as a moon sign character. Up next, let's take a look at her elemental skill, and you'll notice that we're starting off with only one Nodcry moon sign character, being, of course, Jahoda herself. And if we just tap her elemental skill and then just kind of like tap it again, end it early, you'll see that she just basically exploded her cat casket against the Regisfine and just generated some anemo particles, swirled, as well as, well, in this case, triggered the Favonius. So you can also not cancel her elemental skill early if an enemy is nearby and they also have an element on them, and you just press E, she'll actually run around absorbing the element, and once it's full, she'll automatically detonate it. And she'll detonate it, though, automatically with Nascent Gleam. So, yeah, there's very little reason to do this with Nascent Gleam. But to hold up, we've got Ascendant Gleam version of the skill. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. So with Ascendant Gleam of the skill, you'll still fill up the casket and she'll blow it up. But now it will continue to launch attacks while, of course, Jahoda's off field. And what's cool about this that's kind of unique is that every shot actually applies the element that it absorbed. So it applies the element once every 2 seconds. And yeah, a pretty cool little detail about her skill. It actually has some pretty decent elemental application. Now, unfortunately, you guys may have noticed that in combat, Jahoda's elemental skill actually let her run pretty fast. But for exploration purposes, unfortunately, it just doesn't work for exploration purposes. But if there are enemies nearby Jahoda, now you can use it to actually explore and run around. And it's pretty good if there are some enemies that you can piggyback off of, running from one point to the next point. So that's the major caveat here. Let's go ahead and actually use this little guy to our advantage. So yeah, if there are enemies nearby, then you can use Jahoda for exploration purposes. So a bit unfortunate, but it is what it is. All right, next let's take a look at her elemental burst. And her elemental burst has honestly a lot of stuff going on for it, and a lot of that stuff isn't very impactful. So let's start off with her burst and just take a look at the way that it does damage. She summons these two little robot things which basically attack the enemy, and unfortunately they don't apply a lot of, elemental application. I think it's like time-based ICD. So yeah, there's her burst. It doesn't last super long. But yeah, Jahoda's burst also heals. We can see here, personal coordinated assistance robot healing. Let's go ahead and take a look at her healing capabilities. We use her burst, and we can see now that she's healing for 5,500 per tick. And Bennett also happens to be healing a bit. Once the on-field character's HP is over 70%, then it will also heal one of the off-field characters by a bit as well. And frankly, the most important part of Jahoda's burst is actually this passive, where if her burst heals the active team member, aka the character that's on field, and if that character's HP is above 70%, their elemental mastery will be increased by 100 for 6 seconds. So taking a look at Jahoda's elemental mastery stat, we can see that it is currently at 0. And we can also take a look at Aino's elemental mastery stat, which is 692. Because she has the lowest amount of HP. Let's go ahead and use Jahoda's burst. You can see here that Aino's getting healed, aka Jahoda is also getting healed, even though it's overflow healing. And Jahoda now has 100 extra elemental mastery, whereas Aino doesn't, even though she was healed while she was off field. Now Jahoda does have this kind of insane passive, which honestly barely does anything. Depending on the elements of your teammates, the little robots that are burst summons will gain little buffs. And I continued yapping about this for like a minute, which was completely pointless because yeah, these buffs barely do anything, at least from what I'm seeing. So earlier, the burst that you saw had the pyro enhancement, and I'll just show you guys really quick with the electro enhancement. Here we can go ahead and do the usual shenanigans. There we go. Now we've got her burst. And now there are 3 little cat paws. Of course, the damage they're doing is still pretty much negligible. Although, interestingly, 2 of the cat paws seem to be kind of in sync. But yeah, I mean, it's cool that you get an extra robot, I guess. Now, this part of Jahoda's kit is really interesting. And I actually think it's really cool. But we can see here that the Regisvine obviously has Pyro on it, right? What we can do is we can fill her up with Pyro. Then we can actually apply another element, and her burst here will absorb the Hydro. So she's actually applying both Hydro and Pyro right now. A very unique aspect of her kit that I'm not really sure many other characters can do, but I think this is really cool. And currently, I haven't really come up with too much in terms of what you can do with it. But yeah, it's cool how she can infuse 2 elements and apply 2 different elements. If you've been paying attention, you'll notice that Jahoda doesn't do a whole lot of damage. So I was wondering, can I actually get Jahoda to single cycle the Regisvine? Let's actually try to make her do a bit of real damage here. I'm going to slap on the Daybreak Chronicles Venti's signature weapon. This way she's actually got some reasonable offensive stats. Okay, so here's the wacky setup that I have in mind. First, we're going to go for some Cryo Infusion on Jahoda. So we're going to apply this, and we're going to get the Cryo Infusion on Jahoda's Burst. We're going to knock down the Regisvine and get the Pyro Flask right here. Okay, and now we're going to apply the Cryo Sitlali and go for that. Okay, come on, big damage, 50k, 50k, let's go. 46k. Oh man, we lost Bennett's Burst, yo, we still single cycled the Regisvine though. Okay. I mean, that was a lot of effort for very, very little gain, but hey, we did it. It's not Jahoda just yet, guys. In total, Jahoda provides the following for your team. She provides 1 moon sign level, 100 elemental mastery to the active character with her burst, some infused elemental application. She provides pretty good 1 to 2 target healing. Of course, she can provide artifact buffs like the Viridus Inventor, Silken Moon, and others. Being a bow user, she can equip the Elegy for the End if you have it. And lastly, she can provide 50% crit value at Constellation 6. Now, one of the most natural teams, I suppose, that Jahoda could be put in is with Flins. And in this specific composition, you can definitely use a Hydro Applier like Yelan, which feels pretty nice. And we can see here that Jahoda with the Super Mega Flins rotation is able to single cycle our Kongamoto friend, and everyone is using 4-star weapons, by the way. But let's go ahead and take a look at how Jahoda compares to Constellation 6 Sucrose with the Thrilling Tales. And typically speaking, Jahoda's healing is nice, but because you have Ineffa with this specific setup, it's definitely not as important. And we can see here that while Sucrose's final take did 309,000 damage, a lot more damage here, even though they ended up actually clearing in about the same amount of time. That was just because of the way that the energy particles worked out. No surprise here. I'm sure most of us expected Constellation 6 Sucrose with the Thrilling Tales to buff damage by a lot more than a Constellation 0 Jahoda would. Now, hold on to your horses because it's not Jahoda yet, even if you do have Sucrose. Because let's say you have Flins, you also have Nefer, but you don't have Lauma or Ineffa, and you're impatient for Columbina. Well, you can actually put Jahoda with Flins, and now Flins can use an alternative Hydro Applier besides Aino, like Yelan. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at this team in action. Let's go ahead and do a pretty typical rotation. There we go. Into Flins's Mega Rotation. Hopefully we'll get enough energy for it. Yep, looks like we are Gucci on the energy. And who says Gucci these days? I am so sorry. I apologize. Please forgive my transgressions against humanity here, because that was very inappropriate for YouTube. So there we go. As you can see, definitely not as good as with Ineffa, but functional enough. And, you know, it'll certainly help if you only have like Flins and Nefer as an example. And you can, of course, use Jahoda with Nefer just to provide healing as well as 100 elemental mastery buff. And likewise, if Aino is busy on the other side, then you can use Jahoda with Nefer as well. And as we can see, obviously Nefer's not going to have an issue with the Dorito robot. But I do want to point out that it will likely be very difficult to use Constellation 6 Jahoda with Nefer because Dendro will be the dominant aura. So yeah, you may struggle to get Jahoda to work with her Constellation 6 with Nefer, but I think most of us won't have Constellation 6 Jahoda. Alright, and Jahoda's using the 4-piece Silken Moon set in this specific setup because obviously the Viridus Inventor is pretty useless here. Now, another cool team composition you can use is with Jahoda plus Ineffa. These two, of course, make Moon Sign Ascendant Gleam and can form a pretty decent core for various characters to tackle, for example, well, Ascendant Gleam weak enemies and stuff like that. And Hu Tao can take advantage with this and also vape a lot of her damage thanks to another Hydro character also being on the team. And in case you were wondering whether Arlecchino still gets the Elemental Mastery buff from Jahoda, we can see here she's starting at 44. Now, Jahoda uses her burst. We switch over to Arlecchino. She gets healed, although she doesn't get healed. She gets the 100 Elemental Mastery buff regardless. So this means that Jahoda plus Ino can serve as a free-to-play friendly alternative to help deal with these really annoying wild hunt enemies. Because as we can see, because they've activated Ascendant Gleam, Arlecchino is effectively doing well over 2 times the damage against the specific enemy. Yeah, the mechanic is pretty broken. Now this next team is quite the combination of things. It is an Ascendant Gleam plus Hex Array Taser team. That's right, we're combining so many wacky things together to make this team. Now this team definitely didn't feel fantastic by any means. In fact, it felt quite the opposite of fantastic, but it is an all 4-star only Taser team that could actually help in some very niche situations where typically like Lunar Charged and Electro Charged are good and buffed in Abyss. Then yeah, maybe you could consider something like this. And we can even see the setup for these characters that I have is definitely a little weird. But yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of ways to mix and match the artifacts and the stuff like that on this team. But there you go, just a wacky little team to check out for you guys. Now let's try and activate her constellations. And honestly, I'm not going to analyze these early constellations. I apologize. We've got so much to cover. But some of these, do improve her by a little bit. And finally, we have our Constellation 6, which is, of course, the big one. Let's go ahead and give this a try with one of the most intuitive characters to use this with. That, of course, being Flins. All right, so I gave it a few tries, and I came up with this rotation where I actually front load the Jahoda's elemental skill loading up thing, because, yeah, it is very goofy, and it takes a very long time. So either way, though, we can see now Flins is doing over 256,000 damage with a bit higher crit rate on his mini burst. So definitely a damage improvement. And in this clip, we can see a comparison between the various levels of investment. And I just find it so funny watching Constellation 6 Jahoda like running like she's carrying a football trying to fill up her flask. But anyway, Constellation 6 Jahoda, if we're just looking at the crit damage values for Flins, we can see that it added 13.6% more damage. And then once you put the LG for the end on Jahoda, which in this team Yelan can also use as well, keep that in mind. But if it is on Jahoda, then it's plus 26.6% damage. And when comparison to a Constellation 6 Sucrose, well, Sucrose is providing plus 21.7% damage over a Constellation 0 Jahoda. Of course, with the Thrilling Tales, you typically get it every other rotation if your Flins' rotations are super tight, but that's kind of besides the point. And the Constellation 6 Jahoda rotations are a bit extended, especially at the beginning, but I think as you get further on in more rotations, it will be less extended because Flins needs a lot less field time than you might expect. Okay, so what do I think about Jahoda? First, she is whimsically fun, albeit clunky and slightly annoying to use. Her animations are amusing and her kit feels fine for what it does. Yes, she feels like our Jahillionth Sucrose side grade, but at this point, I blame Sucrose for being a bit too universal. Frankly though, Jahoda feels a bit more like a Sayu who actually does something besides just heal. Anyway, Jahoda does have a valuable niche, especially for those of you who have been skipping all the moon sign characters. When we deal with additional Wild Hunt shenanigans in the future, Jahoda will be invaluable even for free-to-play players who only have Ino, because Ascendant Gleam is just so powerful against them and it basically cuts their HP down to a fraction of what they would be without Ascendant Gleam. Also, being a healer means she comfortably fills that much needed role for both Nefer and Flins, who may struggle to have a proper healer due to team building restrictions. Anyway, let me know what you think about Jahoda down in the comments below. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Want to Lose, signing out.